Although Xianxia's heart was tumbling like a huge wave and his mood was chaotic, he was extremely calm on the surface. While chatting with Yang Yan, he inquired about all kinds of information about the great emperor. After all, Yang Yan's memory is slowly recovering now. As the great emperor wisp of spirit, she must be a little flustered too. If Xianxia doesn't keep calm, it will only make things worse. It's just that the only thing Xianxia didn't understand was why the great emperor chose to sleep on the shadowed star. The law of heaven and earth here restricts cultivators from being promoted to the Void King realm. Does it have anything to do with her? After some talk, Xianxia learned that the place where the great emperor was sleeping turned out to be in the Emperor Garden. This reminded him of one thing. That's what Fei Jitu once said. A jade coffin was found in a palace in the Emperor Garden, and there was a person lying in the jade coffin, and the figure was a woman. At that time, Fei Jitu and others triggered the restriction near the jade coffin, so that the Emperor Garden was born, allowing Xianxia, Qian Tong and others to escape. If that's the case, is the woman lying in the jade coffin is the great emperor's body? This terrifying powerhouse fell asleep on this closed and isolated shadowed star. Xianxia thought it was so unrealistic. While meditating and secretly looking at Yang Yan, there was no way to connect her with the Star Emperor who had passed down the entire star territory. Let's go. Yang Yan looked at the supreme profound sect ruins in the mist for a long time, and then said happily, "Don't want to go in and have a look?" "No." Yang Yan slowly shook her head, her steps moved lightly, and moved forward. "Where are you going now?" Xianxia asked puzzledly. "Go to the 6th floor and get something." Yang Yan smiled slightly without explaining much. On the 6th floor, isn't that the place where the attic is located? Back then, he found a good thing like 10,000 years incense in it. From this point of view, that 10,000 years incense was probably what the great emperor had back then. In other words, it was Yang Yan's. Xianxia sniffed. It wasn't embarrassing for him anyway. Yang Yan was basically his own people, and he didn't need to be too virtuous. The speed of the two was not fast, but Yang Yan opened the way in front of them, and any dangers were avoided in this flowing flame sand field, and the two soon came to the 5th layer blazing area. Passing through the same way as the 3rd layer before. The omnipresent heat wave separates itself to the sides as if it was alive, revealing a road leading directly to the 6th floor. A soft cry came from Xianxia's body, and the fiery bird item spirit appeared automatically. It flapped its wings and hovered on top of Xianxia's head, sending a vague message. Xianxia smiled slightly. Knowing its intention, he didn't stop it, but waved his hand and let it go. Item spirit yelled happily and immediately turned into a flame, flew towards the distance, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Looking at that direction, it is surprisingly the location of the Earth-Lung Fire Vein. The Earth-Lung Fire Vein is the source of the birth of the item spirit. Although it has been there for tens of thousands of years, it cannot continue to draw more power from the Earth-Lung Fire Vein due to its growth limitations. But now it is different from the past. The baptism and fusion of the sun's true fire, the fiery bird item spirit has more strength compared to when Xianxia just got it. Now it wants to go to the Earth-Lung Fire Veins. Obviously it wants to swallow the pure firepower there and strengthen itself. How can Xianxia stop these good things? After half a day of work, the two passed through the 5th layer blazing area and reached the exquisite attic hidden in the bamboo forest. Looking at this simple attic, Yang Yan's beautiful eyes flashed with nostalgia. It seemed that the memory was coming in. Thinking about something, Xianxia didn't bother, but came to the bamboo forest and stopped. These bamboos are extremely hard, and Xianxia spent half a year here before cutting more than 20 bamboos with the blade of space. Today, the trails of the cutting are as nude and as vivid as the past. This is golden black bamboo. Although it is an excellent material for refining sword-shaped artifact, it is not worth mentioning compared to its other function, so don't touch them. Yang Yan's voice came from afar. Another effect. Xianxia was stunned when he heard this. He had deeply understood the hardness of this bamboo, and he naturally knew that it was not a leisurely item refining material. Well, after the golden black bamboo blooms, the golden black rice produced is the purest source of energy between the heavens and the earth, which can be consumed by any martial artist to improve the cultivation level without any hidden dangers. Yang Kai looked startled. Is there such a thing? What did I lie to you for? Yang Yan glared at him. Then when will it bloom and produce bamboo rice? Yang Kai asked impatiently. Come on, it's probably not more than 10 or 20 years. Yang Yan pursed her lips, naturally knowing what she was thinking. 10 or 20 years. Yang Kai's expression was extremely ugly. Who would know what happened after 10 or 20 years? Maybe he will no longer be on Shadowed Star by then. With a chuckle, Yang Yan ignored Yang Kai and walked towards the attic. Yang Kai sighed in distress and hurriedly followed. Entering the first floor of the attic, the first thing that catches their eyes is the scroll hung in front of it. There is no other pattern on the scroll, only the back of a woman. When Yang Kai first came here, he had studied this scroll, but no matter how he looked at it, he couldn't find any peculiarities. The scroll seemed to be a common existence in the market without any energy fluctuations. At that time, Yang Kai only felt that this figure was faintly familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere. Now that he looked at it again, he suddenly understood it. This figure is exactly the same as Yang Yan's figure. It was only because of Yang Yan's long wide black robe that Yang Kai didn't think of it for a while, but at this moment, Yang Yan herself stood in front of the scroll, staring intently, the contrast between the two sides, naturally clear at a glance. While thinking like this, the picture scroll seemed to be swayed by the breeze and shook slightly, and then an incredible scene appeared. The back figure on the picture scroll turned around slowly. Her beautiful eyes and Yang Yan looked at each other with a smile at the corner of her mouth. Yang Kai stared at all this in amazement, stunned for a moment. After the woman in the picture scroll turned around, she clearly looked like Yang Yan, no different from her, except that they were wearing different clothes at the moment. Yang Yan was dressed in a black robe, while the woman in the picture scroll was in a white clothes which looked icy and glamorous. This strange scene looked like Yang Yan was standing in front of a mirror, making Yang Kai heart a little weird. What shocked him even more was that the woman in the picture scroll glanced at him, as if she had her own life and consciousness. If Yang Kai had some doubts about Yang Yan's identity before, then his doubts were gone at this moment. The weirdness of this picture alone made Yang Kai unable to guess. One person, one portrait, looking at each other for a long time. Yang Yan suddenly sighed softly. Since I have awakened, you don't have to stay here anymore. Come out, you have worked so hard all these years. I am you, you are me, why do you have such a birth? A voice exactly like Yang Yan came from the picture scroll. Immediately, the woman in the picture scroll smiled slightly, her body swayed, turning into a stream of light that rushed out and disappeared to the top of Yang Yan's head. Yang Yan herself trembled, showing a trace of pain, but soon calmed down, closing her eyes, as if she was feeling something. Yang Kai didn't bother her, this time following Yang Yan to the flowing flame sand field. Everything he saw and heard was beyond his comprehension, and the great emperor's methods were not accessible to cultivators of his class. After the portrait of the great emperor disappeared, the scroll made a clatter, and a fire spontaneously rose, and disappeared into the world after a short while. Yang Yan was still closing her eyes to perceive the information, and Yang Kai didn't bother her, and just waited aside. About 2 hours later, Yang Yan suddenly let out a breath of sigh, slowly opened her beautiful eyes, and turned to Yang Kai and smiled. Although still unable to detect Yang Yan's cultivation realm, Yang Kai always felt that after receiving the scroll portrait, Yang Yan's aura had changed a bit, and it seemed to have become stronger. This is a secret move left by the great emperor that year. If I fail to appear in time, she will play a role. Yang Yan explained softly. What does it do? Awakening the great emperor. Yang Yan replied slowly, you should be glad that you are not a woman. If you were a woman, you would have already been taken over when you went deep into this place. Yang Kai rolled his eyes, and looked speechless, but soon he became suspicious again. You mean, you now have the task of awakening the great emperor? Yes. Yang Yan nodded. How to wake up? Wait for the emperor garden to open, and go deep into it. Yang Yan raised her head and looked towards the direction of the emperor garden. Unfortunately, this place was the flowing flame sand field. The sky was covered by the blazing heat, isolated from the outside world. Yang Kai didn't ask more. Sometimes knowing too much is not necessarily a good thing. This matter here is finished, let's go back, Yang Yan said with satisfaction. Well, wait a moment. Yang Kai nodded, and at the same time sent a command in his heart. He stood there and waited. After a while, a fire blaze swiftly flew from far. It was the fiery bird item spirit that had left Yang Kai before. In the blink of an eye, item spirit rushed in front of Yang Kai. Its body was full of flames. It seemed that although the time was not long, item spirit still got a lot of benefits from the earth-lung fire vein. After being summoned by Yang Kai, item spirit was still reluctant to give up and kept screaming. Yang Kai moved his hand and item spirit obediently sank into his body. The two of them walked out side by side. In order to avoid being seen by others, the two of them went out very carefully. Fortunately, the Emperor Garden was born and attracted the attention of most cultivators. Not many people rushed to Flowing Flame Sand Field to investigate the situation. After some concealment, the two finally left the Flowing Flame Sand Field in amazement. Out of this forbidden area, Yang Yan immediately sacrificed the Flying Shark battle shuttle and galloped in the direction of Heavenly Fate City. To be continued.